Hello, and welcome to CyberDeck Users Weekly, a weekly show that I haven't done in a year and a half. Uh, I'm joined, we talk about technology here, and I'm joined by someone I view as someone deeply focused on the ethics of technology. It's Hodlbod, also known as John. So thank you for joining me, Hodlbod.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Is that a fair characterization that you are deeply focused on the ethics of technology?
Yeah, I think so. I have kind of a sensitive conscience, and so anytime I put any effort into doing something, I get wrapped around all of the possible negative externalities and conflicts of interest that are involved in it. And if I don't try to tamp that down a little bit, I end up in a lot of analysis paralysis. But yes, to the extent that I don't have to spend, to the extent that I have the luxury to think about things, I read a lot of books and kind of just ponder on things. And yeah, ethics is very important to me.
John is the host of the Thank God for Nostr podcast, which I greatly enjoy. And you've dug into a lot of this. You've definitely read a lot more books. I have the similar thought of, yeah, I want to make sure I'm obsessed with technology. This is something that I've, realized about myself, even since I was very young, very interested in it. And so I want to make sure that that is aligned with what's most important to me, which is my faith. And see so many bad things happen with technology, right? And I like to complain about those. And so I'd love to figure this out. And I feel like you've done a lot of the hard work of digging into the problem. So I really appreciate that podcast.
Yeah, and definitely, and I'm a Christian too, so that is a lot of what motivates me. Is like we should be working for God's glory and for the good of our neighbor. And if the technology is so complex that it's really hard to know for sure that that's what you're doing. And of course, life is too. So to a certain extent, we have to leave things up to God. He's the one who establishes the work of our hands for us. But we can't shrug off all responsibility for the outcomes of what we do.
Absolutely. So why do you hate AI so much?
Okay, so do you want the emotions oriented answer, or the logical justification?
Let's start with some feelings.
Yeah, well, I hate AI because I love coding. I really, really like to code and get in there and get in that state of flow. This is the conversation that everyone's been having for the last 6 months is flow is taken away by AI because you become a babysitter. And I think there's definitely something to that. I really like just focusing on a problem and building something that's, it's code. It's not real in a physical sense, but it's my work. It has an aesthetic value to it. And the value of it is not just output, it's the ability to maintain it, the ability to be proud of it, the satisfaction of having a good mental model. And AI kind of takes away a lot of those things. Now, of course, that's not exactly true. You've got the sort of 2023 or 4 era GitHub Copilot cursor sort of model where you've got this thing that's just like a total idiot for pounding out boilerplate. And that's an entirely separate thing from a lot of the new ideas that are entering the mainstream right now, like context engineering and multi-agent sort of workflows and stuff like that. So there's a lot of nuance, obviously. But yeah, emotionally, every time I try to use a new AI flow, someone swears by it. And I'll go and I'll try it and I'll just hate it. Like, okay, so I did an experiment a couple weeks ago, so I could really just let this rest and just do my own programming for a few months and not worry about AI. I implemented the same app twice in one day. First, I used the Stacks agent, getstacks.dev by Alex Gleason, and it took me about 4 hours, and the result was a pretty looking interface, but it was completely non-functional. And this is like, it's more agentic. It's got a big context file, so and it's got a built-in library so that it can do Nostr stuff pretty well. And then after lunch, I implemented the same thing. It took me 3 hours. It was functional. It didn't look quite as good, but I was done. So landlubber.coracle.social is the outcome of that. So for me, as an experienced programmer who understands Nostr really well, I'm writing a proof of concept kind of micro app kind of thing. It was it was actually a drag on productivity to use the AI flow. And there's a skills gap there, I think, but there have been some studies that have come out that show that programmers think they have 110% or like a 10 to 30% productivity gain, but the actual fact of the matter is they have a 10 to 30% reduction in productivity. And of course, these are tasks that are assigned in a particular kind of like team and environment and stuff like that. So like everything can be nuanced to death. And I think there are definitely a lot of things that make the sort of curmudgeonly initial negative reaction against AI not completely valid. But I do think it's directionally correct or intuitively correct.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I have so many thoughts, and that's one one of the reasons I'm trying to get your thoughts on this. Um, eh, I emotionally dislike the curmudgeonly knee-jerk reaction. Um, I also actually do like to code. I think the thing is I got into coding because I wanted to build things, and being able to build things through vibe coding has proved actually more effective for me. Like I'm getting more things done, and I'm also doing things that I did not feel capable of doing um, without AI, which is also kind of the scariest thing to build with AI, because you don't know well enough how it's working to be able to fix it if something's going wrong, and you end up with a lot of potential slop or inefficiencies or problems that you don't even understand. Um, so I feel that, and I do love code. I miss it, and I literally this weekend sat down and like was working on ray tracing in a weekend, and I did it with an editor that didn't have any AI autocomplete at all, just to try to learn my tools a little bit better. But of course, I had an AI in a window that I was asking questions to. Uh, that was very helpful. And so I think I'm writing an essay, and it's kind of spiraled out of control, and it's at a size now that nobody will read it if it's not actually a book. Um, and I've never written a book before, so I'm a little scared of that. Um, but I thought it was interesting. I was listening to you on Citadel Dispatch, and you were talking about how you don't want to vibe code your main projects, but you needed a marketing page, and so you vibe coded the marketing page. And I'm starting to see this as a bit of a theme. I call it, like, like the idea of gel man amnesia, where you're reading a newspaper article um, about a topic that you have real deep domain expertise, and you see everything that they're getting wrong. Like, if you read an article from a normie publication about Bitcoin, and it's like it's got a million factual inaccuracies in it, and then you go on to read another article, and it's like, oh, well, this is interesting, useful information. You don't know what you don't know, and so you don't know what is factually inaccurate about that next piece. Um, I feel like there's something about AI where I don't vibe any of my writing. I was a professional writer for, over a decade. I take a lot of pride in my specific voice, and I want this very direct expression from what I'm feeling and how I, craft it. And like I don't know if I can notice anybody else's AI essays. Some are a little obvious, but I would definitely notice if somebody said this is written by Paul, but it wasn't. Uh, and so I write my own stuff. And then with coding, there's some projects that I am much more in the weeds on what's happening, and I'm more micromanaging. I'm asking for specific edits with AI rather than just sitting back, vibing, and looking at the results. And that's actually, it's more like I'm more of a front end guy, so it's more of like the aesthetic stuff, the marketing page type stuff that I would be, more focused on my craft for. And then there's other projects, that I don't I don't know enough about them to want to spend the time to learn how to do it myself. So I just totally vibe it and kind of trust the AI on it. Um, so I feel like there's something interesting of what we tend to want to protect and like this is my thing that I'm good at and I want to continue doing it versus what we are willing to vibe.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's really insightful. I just finished a book too. It's like 130 pages. It's 35,000 words. So if you're at 10,000 on your essay, just keep going a little bit longer and you'll be there.
There you go. How do you go from 10? Wait, but what's, how do you draw the rest of the, because I feel like I write long essays, and I cap out around 5,000, and at that point it becomes too complicated for me to understand. Actually, what I do now is I take my essay and I put it into Notebook LM and have it make me a podcast about my essay to like re-describe it to me so I can try to keep the structure in my head.
That's funny. I did the opposite. I made an outline and I tried to write based on the outline, but I get so distracted by new ideas when I'm writing. It's not a fast enough medium for me to output what I'm trying to get on the paper. So what I did instead was I went for a long walk and dictated the book chapter by chapter based on the outline. And that gave me the ability to take rabbit trails without losing track of what I was talking about and stick to the outline. And then I used Riverside to transcribe it. And then I used an agent to remove all the transcription artifacts and fix the grammar and punctuation and stuff. And then I edited it 2 or 3 times manually. So yeah, like I maintain my voice. The LLM did censor me once though. I had made like a slightly off color point or metaphor in the book, and that actually got sanitized from the final version because it was removed as a transcription artifact.
That's so funny. Yeah,
But yeah,
there's definitely in my AI podcast version of my essay, and I've actually used this almost as a flag sometimes of where I'm not being clear enough, where their summary literally makes the opposite point of what I was trying to say. They literally do like a binary inversion on what I was trying to say. And I'm realizing, oh, I like I'm trying to, speak truth to power. I'm trying to like say something, wild. And so they're like, well, he clearly didn't mean that. So let's flip it upside down. But yeah, okay. So I think this is where why I start my essay that maybe will be a book someday if I ever, maybe I will copy your process. That sounds actually really fun. I start my essay disagreeing with Tucker Carlson. His thing for years has been we should ban driverless trucks because of just traditional protectionist impulses of this will cause so much economic disruption. There's like, I don't know, there's a bunch of different numbers, but somewhere like 3.5 million to like 10 million truck drivers or commercial drivers, and it's the most common profession for someone with a man with a high school education, and this will destroy, these driverless trucks will destroy millions of families. And I reject that for like economic reasons, but I also I dislike the unreflective curmudgeons not because they're wrong about the negatives that they're highlighting necessarily. Sometimes they are, but that they're never long-term right in helping us solve the problem. Like, the way I think of it is like, how Sam Altman has evil designs for our society, and if my pastor or whichever friendly neighborhood curmudgeon with a Nostr focused podcast, you know, says things that are, here are the evil things that Sam Altman wants to do, or my dad's a big Steve Bannon fan, and Steve Bannon pushes this book called Dark Aeon, which is like about here are what these demonic transhumanists, here's what they want. They want to build an AI god, and they want to upload our consciousness to it, and they want to sacrifice humanity on the altar of progress and all these things. Even if those problems highlighted are 100% true, they don't go far enough for me to explain what we should do about it. And I think there's actually a lot of obviously good things in AI. And I think what happens is you have curmudgeons saying these things, and then you have people, it's like, well, this curmudgeon, doesn't want me to do anything ever. They just want me to like sit in my house and like carve wood by candlelight or something like that. So they're clearly out of touch with reality. I have to live a real life, so I'm just going to do these things anyways, And so now these things are done sort of unreflectively, and so you end up with like a Mark Zuckerberg designing your society via producing compelling social media products. Whereas I love like the Bitcoin ethos and the Nostr ethos is like, hey, we're gonna take responsibility. We want digital money. We want some form of social media. We want to use the internet to communicate and to promulgate ideas and collaborate. We see these dangers and the evil ways that they've been trying to use to control us, and so we're going to have a principled approach to building the world that we want to see. And these aren't always perfectly successful. I think Bitcoin is one of the best examples of this. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with I have a knee-jerk reaction against the knee-jerk reaction of curmudgeons.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super good point. I mean, the whole conversation is so binary. It's like, are you for AI or against? Like that's about as deep as you can get a lot of the times. And then, you'll read an article that has a little bit more of a nuanced take, and then you'll synthesize that into your understanding of the situation. And then, but we're always able to articulate a lot less than what's actually in our head. And what's in our head is a lot less than what we've actually learned. And people don't actually, in general, learn most topics very deeply. Like the same point you were making earlier about reading an article that you're an expert in versus not. And so the opinions that people are able to articulate are so surface level. And I don't know if it's because of egotism or like political polarization or tribalism or what, but those opinions are informed much more by identity in a lot of cases than by substance. And so like, if someone you like says a particular thing, then you're just going to say, well, I think this in line with them because I've got a meeting in 2 minutes and I got to go and my kid's throwing up, like whatever. And so like the dialogue about new technology is very difficult. And there's another thing too, is that we are living in the future. The people who lived in the 60s were living in our future, in the sense that, you look at at predictions that were made 50 years ago about today, and they're all so completely absurd. Even if they're like sort of essentially right, they get a lot of the accidental, uh, details completely wrong because they don't fully understand the nature of the thing that they're analyzing. But also, the way that things turn out is a result of a complex interplay of all kinds of different things. Like the curmudgeon, I always like quoting. There's this guy Topher Fielding who did a bunch of like anti-COVID protests in Australia in during the COVID lockdowns and everything, and he always says like make room for the asshole. He was the asshole, and he was just making a whole bunch of noise and being very provocative, and that was what galvanized a lot of people. So I think like you need assholes on every side of an issue in order to make a bunch of noise and say a bunch of things that may be one-sided in order to advance that like collective conversation and get somewhere. But like, Marshall McLuhan, he's my absolute favorite media theorist. He invented the whole field of media ecology, and his predictions are pretty close to garbage. But he was looking at the 50s and the 60s, and he saw what we think we're living in now. But we're actually living in something that we're only going to understand 50 years from now. So like all that long-winded way of saying, we don't understand what AI is. And so we see these obvious things like, and then we extrapolate things out. So like there was that article that Alexander, what's his name, from the Slate Star Codex, he like partnered with a bunch of academics to extrapolate what AI was going to do in the next 2 years, and his
AI 2027.
Yeah. The end of his essay was this like, well, we either like take control of it now, or it becomes anti-human and destroys us all. The thing about extrapolation is you can't do it unless you know the limiting principle of something. Every technology adoption curve is an S curve, right? It goes slow and then it goes straight up and then it flattens out at the top. And we're at the bottom of the AI adoption S curve where things are accelerating still. But we don't know what the limiting principle of AI adoption is. Is it the same? Is it going to be the same technology, or is it going to recursively improve itself? Is the limiting principle like the ingestion of all the material in the universe in the creation of a mechanical mind? Is it
Paper
like
clips.
yeah, paper clips, exactly? Or is it social? Is there a social limiting factor? Are they really stochastic parrots, and there's a limiting principle in there? Like, we just don't really know, both in like scientific terms, but also in like in terms of it, like market terms, like how willing are people to adopt this technology? And so, like the trucker example you gave is really good because it's nice and concrete. You've got the one side, which is the futurists that are like, let's do self-driving trucks because it'll create prosperity, and somehow, like, step 3 question mark, step 4 profit. Somehow the benefits of the increased productivity are going to trickle down to everyone, and everyone will be wealthier. And I mean, there's some intellectual dishonesty involved in that, because if we're talking about a capitalistic sort of framework, you're just making the owners of the capital wealthier, and they have no obligation to share with anyone else unless they're forced to through taxes. And now you're appealing to socialism and state force in order to
This is an economically bankrupt state.
All right, you can explain why in a minute, but like I don't think the benefits of improved technology are going to automatically accrue to everyone. I mean, there is a certain extent to which that happens, but in the short term, it's not automatic. And so the other side is like, well, these people have families, right? And they're going to lose their job, and that's hard. And it's like, well, you can reskill. It's not that big a deal. People lose jobs all the time. What I feel like no one's really talking about is like, well, what's our 10-year plan to get from point A to point B? You can't really fight the progress of technology, uh, there's a self-reinforcing aspect of it where to the extent that we adopt efficiency optimizing technology, the we also adopt a frame that is oriented towards optimizing efficiency. And so we can't really resist. We don't have the political will to resist a technology that optimizes for efficiency. And so like we should recognize that and say like, well, we're going to do this anyway. How can we make the transition easier over the course of 10 years and say, instead of like, we're not going to do self-driving trucks, just say like, well, let's guarantee that we're not over the next 10 years, but then we're going to like, put some money into reskilling truckers and stuff like that. There are ways forward. And I do like, I strongly sympathize with the Luddites. But the only way is through, the only way out is through of the dilemmas that we're in. And, they were the naive curmudgeonly types, just destroying the technology that was displacing them. But their objection, the looms, their objection was valid because it was a shift. The Industrial Revolution was a shift from communal value to economic value. So like money displaced relationships. And that's what they were really reacting against, even if they didn't understand it at the time.
This is okay. Yeah, there's a lot here. This is what I kind of don't like Chesterton's fence anymore, because it's like, well, it's not applied fully. It's like, okay, I see this fence here, so this is how things are, right? I'm going to default assume that there's a good reason things are like this, right? And I'm not just going to rip up the fence. But I think there's an important step B, figure out why the fence is there. And I feel like, Tucker Carlson's, solution, 10-year plan for this is to blow up the data centers. And that's not really going to happen, right? So it's actually not a proposal of anything at all. It's a proposal of
absolutely.
coping and seething. And that's not how we get the best outcome, right? And, I think one reason why these are AI becomes very difficult to talk about is most of the information we have is from incredibly biased sources. So, you have the head of an AI lab say that we're 2 years away from replacing 90% of white collar jobs with our software. Please invest, and then you have the AI safety team, say, hey, we're 2 years away from a doomsday caused by AI spiraling out of control. Please hire more AI safety people. You have me is like, please allow me to vibe code things because I feel very productive doing it. So there's a lot of self-interest in how we talk about these things. CEOs love this as cover for, they probably should have done layoffs a while ago. They've been kind of in a soft recession for a while. And now they can claim to their shareholders, actually, we're doing these layoffs because we're so much more productive with AI, And then somebody else who does the study you cited, says that they're not more productive with AI. I do think you talked about that limit, and I do think that's actually very helpful and very important. And I think that actually unpacks a lot more of what we should be doing right now is by diagnosing what it's actually capable of, what it's actually good at, and not playing pretend, and not believing the hype. But also not dismissing it out of hand if there is something valuable there.
Yeah, but believing the hype is almost like a corollary of the Chesterton's fence point. Like you got Chesterton's fence and conservatives are like, well, I guess we'll just leave it there. And then you've got the hype, which is this progressive sort of imagination-filled vision for what the future could be. And if you unreflectively attach yourself to that, you get different problems, but in similar severity. It was pointed out to me, I can't remember what I was reading, but there's this tension between memory and imagination. And if you isolate one, then you have all kinds of problems. So like conservatism is like, let's remember and then never do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And progressives are like, let's imagine, but let's forget everything that came before. But in order to faithfully imagine, you need to remember. So you need to like study history, understand it, even, fill yourself with good things to become the kind of person that is filled with those things. So like that's why we memorize scripture, is not so we know it, but so that we can become spirit-filled people. And then you apply your imagination in order to move out of that memory. And I think there's such a temptation. I don't know if it's temperamental or what, to just do one or the other of those things.
Mm. Yeah, well, I definitely know myself as a, kind of reflexive technology lover, that I'm kind of trend towards the progressive version of that. And I can, for instance, I can imagine a very good outcome for truckers, right? Um, you, in the next couple of years, you get into a self-driving truck that you sit there and it drives itself, right? Um, so you still have a job because someone's got to babysit the truck. And knowing the limits of AI right now, like, I live in Austin. Like Waymos are going by me constantly. Those are still, uh, they still don't take you to the airport, right? They're geographically constrained because that's what they have the best training data on, is the specific boundary, right? And they're also remotely controlled in a lot of sense, a lot of ways for specific situations, as far as I understand. So if you don't understand where we're at right now, you might think robot trucks are about to just like snap and every trucker's out of a job. But in reality, we're looking at least, I would say, like a 10-year transition where truckers will be sitting in trucks with more and more automation, probably until the point where you'll get a truck onto a highway, the trucker will hop out, do a dive roll. The truck will be able to drive itself on interstates for, nice 12 hours straight or whatever. And then a trucker is going to need to hop back in to do the last mile, because that's the harder part of trucking, from a cognitive perspective. And so now you could have a trucker that, instead of being out of town most of the week on the road, they could live closer to a geographical area and just, guide trucks home over the last, 30 minutes of the trip or whatever, that we're not yet capable, I'm assuming, of doing automatically. And just knowing the state of the art of Waymo, which is the peak of self-driving currently. So I see a pretty nice segue for the trucker in that case of, your day-to-day job gets easier, but you still have a job. And then your day-to-day job gets way cooler because now you can be near your family more often. It's awful that we expect, these guys to be away so much. And, it's not like trucking is like one of these, core human arts that we've been doing for thousands of years, I guess in other styles of it, but not specific truck driving. And then the bad outcome to me is something like, you have the dock workers in California, like holding the whole economy hostage over there. Like they have legalized protections of that we can't improve or modernize shipping in the United States because these guys are protected. And I think that's what you end up with if you were try to artificially protect the laptop class or the trucker class. And I in my essay, maybe book, I actually say Sam Altman and Tucker Carlson want the same thing, right? They're just going at it different ways. They both ultimately want like a UBI. Like, look, you are useless, right? You do not provide any economic value to society. So we're just going to provide you with a fake job so that you don't like have a drug overdose out of despair or something like that. And I think that's I call my essay Where AI Ends. And I do think it's really important, like you said, to find the limit of what this technology is actually capable of, so that we don't overstate it. And I think one of the things is, I believe as a Christian, human work will not be obsoleted by a technology, because God commanded us to work. And he wouldn't command us to do something that we would like innovate our way out of, right? So there's always going to be valuable human work to do. And also we can obviously, use some wisdom and remembrance to see that technological disruption of certain kinds of work have happened before, and so will likely happen again. So we should be focusing some of our wisdom juice on understanding the best way to go through those, rather than just kicking and screaming.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with tons of that. And I like your vision for the possible future of trucking. Marshall McLuhan has this fourfold framework for understanding what any new technology does. First, it extends agency. Second, it amputates ability. Third, it recovers something that's been lost. And then fourth, it has unintended negative consequences. So first, like these self-driving trucks are extending the agency of someone. And I think it's interesting to ask, like, whose agency are they extending? Are they extending the agency of the truckers? Well, not really, because the truckers don't have any agency in the first place. They're actually extending the agency of the companies that are doing all the shipping, which kind of complicates things because it's a much more systematic thing. And I probably don't understand trucking well enough to comment. But they're allowing the companies to have is it cheaper if you still have to employ people? Is it less error prone? Are you going to have fewer accidents? Like, yeah, marginally that might matter for supply chains, but I'm not exactly sure what sort of agency, what problem self-driving trucks even solve, right? So leaving that aside, like, what does it amputate? Well, it amputates the ability to have people in the truck all the time, or on site, the ability to repair the truck if it breaks down, like you got to send someone out or something like that. It recovers, like, assume that the truckers can live at the last mile, right? It recovers localism, instead of this like spread out way of living, detached and, showering in truck stops and stuff like that. And then negative externalities is like the concentration of influence in the trucking industry to the the people who are creating the technology or who own the trucks. And we see this with the car industry all the time. They lobby for protection of their industry so that they create a moat, and they're maybe they would claim that other cars that are run by humans are threatening the safety of their trucks on the road, and so regular human drivers get squeezed out and are no longer able to drive cars freely, and everyone's dependent on the internet and these data centers for getting around. Like, I'm not necessarily like even a holdout for humans driving cars, because self-driving cars, assuming they get to the point where they could be more reliable, that seems like a big enough improvement. But that's like an example of a negative externality. And so, like, when you're thinking about what we should do in response to some issue, like, this is the main thing that I am always trying to say, but there's so many things in the way before I get there, is like, well, we have to understand what the thing is, right? So we're exercising memory in saying, I know what exists currently and I'm comfortable with it and I want to stay here. And we exercise imagination in saying, I can envision a future and I want to go there. But those are both like desires based rather than like sort of a neutral understanding of what the thing is. Like memory, that's not like, I've already decided I want to be here, is like, well, what exactly is the situation? What are the problems? Like, where did this all come from? Because, trucking is weird in the first place. Trucking displaced railroads, right? And I don't really understand why.
Doesn't really seem that. It doesn't seem great. I really don't know why.
But they've ripped all the railroads out, and like I assume it's the flexibility for that, like kind of like last mile delivery, where even if you have to drive 1,000 miles, it's worth it to be precise about where you want to end up. And it probably has to do with like the subsidy of like taxpayer subsidy of highways reducing the maintenance cost of shipping. So like we already have
even the taxpayer subsidy of kind of the technocratic planning of interstates. I mean, I really actually, my essay is spiraling. I just wrote a section where I'm just complaining about how we designed, how we kind of ruined urban planning, basing around the car. Like we adopted the car kind of unreflectively. And that's had some really, negative effects on community because people kind of live in these kind of isolated bubbles away from each other. They don't walk to the corner store. They don't run into their neighbors, and they maybe live 30 minutes from their church, and so they kind of hardly see anybody all week. And so, we have kind of like a loneliness epidemic. And I think part of it is because we kind of made these hermetically sealed living arrangements enabled by the ability of the car to take you a long way. And so it's like, it's so interesting to me. It's like, there's lots of things. It's like walking is really good for you. You were able to write a book by walking. I personally try to design my life so that I can do a lot of what I do day to day by walking or biking. I have a car. There's a lot of places that I could walk to, but it would be really, really dumb of me. But it's not like nobody's ever walked that far before. I didn't know this, but Abraham in the Bible, when he's called out of Ur or whatever, his journey to Canaan is like 1,500 miles. So he did a lot of walking. So it's like, yeah, I think it's so hard with the coding thing. I guess that really is like, yeah, what are your ends, right? It's like if your goal is intellectual stimulus, go for a walk. If your goal is to get there really quickly, a drive. With coding, is your goal the artifact, or is your goal the joy of coding? I think a kind of an interesting case to me that's weirdly like slam dunk is, there used to be there was a job called being a computer. Like this was a name for a kind of person that did math and added and subtracted and multiplied lots of numbers together, right? And then we made a machine that does that. And we still learn it as a fun novelty in school. But really, most math now, we're just pretty happy to delegate it. And it didn't seem, I don't know of any good stories of the computers, rising up against computers. It just seemed like such an obvious win. Most technologies do not end up seeming that cut and dry. It seems like we really lose something big, in the McLuhan framing. That it's kind of sad. My hope would be that if my goal is to make software, and that's not my whole goal. My goal is actually the goal of that software. What that software is designed to do. That I would use AI when I believe that I can do that better, and that I would avoid AI if it's getting in the way of that goal. And I think it's challenging to strike that balance.
Yeah, well, let me try to come back to that. But first, I want to like harp on, like make a point about the trucking thing too. That's like, we talk about like, should we keep going with AI or not? But there's this implicit assumption that everyone knows what that actually means. And the actual fact of the matter is way more complex than this binary, like that thing a couple of years ago about a moratorium on AI. It's just like, let's just, stop AI research for 6 months. That's a psychotic thing to even propose. But
Yes.
also, like, okay, well, stop what parts of it? Are we stopping the application of the stuff that's already been created? Are we stopping like a particular like type of research into alignment or into self improvement? Or are we stopping agents? Or are we stopping like it on the copyright level of like scraping the internet? Like, what are we actually talking about here? And that those are just like the attributes of the technology itself as we understand it. But technology creates an environment in which people exist and then have other problems that they want to solve with technology, or have inspiration and new tools that they can come up with technologies that may then search for a problem. So, like there's this constant interaction of different technologies and of people and their different desires, right? That produce new environments. So like we have to look at things environmentally, and so if you do, then like the like raisin subsidy of 1934 or whatever in California might have something to do with the future of AI, right? Like there was a raisin maybe I can't remember what it is, but like there was some like shortage. Oh no, they produced too much raisins. The raisin farmers
Hmm.
produced too much raisins, and so the United States was like, all right, well we'll guarantee the market for raisins so that you guys don't go out of business because prices fell through the floor. And that was like this band-aid solution for a single year, but it's still in effect. And so like you have all these like raisin cabals and stuff in California that are always like, ah ha ha, we've got our guaranteed subsidy. It's absurd. It's completely insane. You've also got the United States cheese strategic cheese reserve. Are you familiar with this? There's a
No, that
cave.
sounds great though.
Yeah, dude.
That's
There's
good.
I want to go there, but there's a cave in Illinois that's just full of like 1 billion pounds of cheese.
Well,
Uh,
a good example to me is we subsidize corn so much that they have to find ridiculous uses for it, like burning it in cars.
Yeah, not as funny, but a better example for sure. But yeah, there's like all these weird things, these like uh, cross pollination of politics and culture and history and technology that all affect each other. And so like, what are the problems that we're trying to solve with AI? What are the problems that even caused AI to come about, that make it popular, that make people willing to accept such a thing? So and I don't know any of those answers, but those have to be part of the understanding and the discussion of like, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish? And in concrete cases, I think like engineers especially, but just people in general, have this tendency to over abstract and say like, we have a category for something, and so we can deal with the category as a whole with no reference to the context. But people interact differently when they're around different people, and technologies interact differently when they're in different contexts, along any number of axes. So it's hard to make like a actual point about this because it's just so wide ranging, and just like look at the context. It isn't a very helpful thing to say, but
Hmm.
um,
Well, maybe I can help with that because I do think that's really, I think that's exactly right in the sense that we have to, I believe we should blow up all the curmudgeons and embrace the fact that this stuff is going to happen and then examine it in each actual specific instance. Um, like I just listened to this Mere Fidelity podcast on AI that was I hated it, but I didn't really disagree with much of what they were. They were showing a lot of dangers, right? For instance, like okay, you ask ChatGPT every time you have a question about sermon prep, and now you are spending less time reaching out to your brothers in Christ to prepare your sermon. So you're actually socially isolating yourself, or you're already socially isolated, and now you've found kind of like a cheap um, pornographic in some sense replacement for that real relationship. Um, Obviously, the aspect of that, if you ask the AI to write a sermon for you, it's not really Holy Spirit inspired. Um, So like I kind of agreed with most of what they were saying about that specific context. I was just sort of frustrated that they seemed so content to just have all of these problems and put this podcast into the world without the understanding that like everybody listening to them is going to be vibe coding and prompting, tons of aspects of their life, just like without uh I feel like you either do it thinking that it's wrong, that's wrong as a Christian to do, um, or you just assume it doesn't apply to you, so that you don't have to be reflective on this case. But where I was going with that is my essay slash book has where AI ends. My answer is that I don't believe in that it will make a superhuman, or that our AIs that we build will recursively improve into a superhuman. I have a lot of arguments for why I believe that. I think we can't define better well enough to write it down for recursive self-improvement to work. It's also hilarious that like AIs will, when they try to do this, the AI will reword or change the acceptance criteria of better, which I see that happen with vibe coding. It will run into a problem where one of the tests isn't passing, so it will just delete the test. Which I think is it's funny because one of the things I like, and I think McLuhan talks about this, there's a mirror aspect to anything we create, right? And there's a lot of mirror in creating something that's so mind-like as AI. And the idea of wanting to redefine the criteria for salvation rather than lining up with God's criteria for salvation is such a human instinct, and it's so interesting to see it happen in like all day, every day when I'm vibe coding. But ultimately, I don't think AI can have the fruit of the Spirit, right? Because where does the fruit of the Spirit come from? It comes from the Spirit. So that without the vine, there's no branches and fruit, right? So if AI can't be indwelled by the Holy Spirit, I think most people would agree with that. Then it can't have the fruit of the Spirit, and so we're told with the fruit of the Spirit things like faith, hope, patience, gentleness, faithfulness, love, things like that. Against these things there is no law. So like these are things that you can do if you are like like locked up in a prison cell, or if you're like paralyzed or whatever. They're things that you don't need material or in some sense technique to do. You can exercise these things no matter what, and you are commanded and encouraged to exercise these things. And therefore, I posit that for these things there is no technology. So in a case that involves you loving a person, there are techniques that you can and are wise to employ. Like if you live out of state and it's your mom's birthday, you could call her on the phone using technology, but phones can't love your mom for you, right? Your iPad can't raise your kids for you. An analogy I always use is if you go to the gym and a technology pulled down the lat pull down machine on your behalf, you wouldn't actually be gaining any of the value. And so insofar as we attempt to shortcut or short circuit the actual fruits of the Spirit part of our work, that's when we're in trouble. And so I think similarly, like, with a trucker, there's, and this is why I detest this idea that these guys don't have any economic usefulness if robot trucks exist. these guys are incredibly responsible. They're driving around millions of dollars of merchandise for hours at a time with, an incredibly low accident rate. And so they have to be reliable and responsible and show up on time and determined and patient and all these things. Those are, in some sense, they're what they bring to the work, and we would be lucky to have them in other parts of the economy. And so that's kind of where I like am trying to hone in on these things and trying to examine my own life a little bit. And like, am I using this as a shortcut to not have to develop the fruits of the spirit or express the fruits of the spirit, or is this helping me uh, to do that thing? Is this helping me call my mom?
Yeah, I love that. The human value that people add to something is the virtue that they have inculcated rather than the skills that they've acquired. Skills, they're hard to replace, but virtue is like a trajectory of who you actually are becoming over the course of your entire life. It's even harder to take a left turn with that unless the spirit is involved and you're saved or something like that. But
And we're
um,
not guaranteed outcomes, right? We're commanded to work. We're commanded to obey God and live this way, but we're not guaranteed, the results. And so I think there's an aspect of faith in this, of like, hey, I'm going to continue to work faithfully unto God, and then I'm going to believe that God will bring me the results that He desires for me.
yeah, and he doesn't guarantee the results, and he also doesn't guarantee the means. Like earlier, you were saying, with LLMs displacing your ability to code things by hand, do you care more about the experience or do you care more about the output? And like, uh, in a sense, neither is important. And in a sense, both are important. It's almost like a false dichotomy. Uh, you know, it, what comes to mind is the distinction between a manager and an entrepreneur. Like the entrepreneur uh, loves the project. He's interested in it. It's what he chose to do. He's put a lot of himself into it, so he's highly invested, and he's going to go through whatever painful process is required in order to make the thing successful in like monetary and missional terms. Whereas a manager just gets paid no matter what, and he's happy to go down with the ship. And he feels like personally attacked when the system that gives his job meaning changes. And I think of the two, it's obviously better to be an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is not like he's not attached to the outcome exclusively because he's an entrepreneur. Like he's willing to face a ton of risk. So he wants to do something with his life that is unique and difficult. And if he fails, he will still have, like, in a sense, achieved his goal of being an entrepreneur. At the same time, he's very tied to the outcome, and how he gets to the outcome doesn't matter. I was part of a startup 10 years ago where we were making like a 3D printer vending machine, and we tried to sell it to universities and they didn't want it. We tried to sell it to local libraries and the business model didn't make any sense. But then we like pivoted to a like service bureaus, which are like manufacturing bureaus, and it just didn't make any sense to me at the time because I was just the coder, and it made my life really hard because we were constantly changing the entire purpose of the software every like month. But my boss, he was like, we have a certain runway. We have to become profitable. We have to secure a big contract. So let's get it done. So yeah, it's like, the practice of doing the work is valuable because it affects who you are, right? Like you invest certain parts of yourself into it and you become a certain thing based on the shape of the work. And then the outcome obviously is important because it allows you to raise your family, produce societal goods. And so you can't really have one without the other, in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I think we should keep digging into this because I think this is so huge because it's like, and I think maybe that's part of like I got into coding because I wanted to make stuff. And why did I want to make stuff? Because I kind of have this innate you know, technological optimism. And so I wanted to see the good come out of it, you know. Um, and I see a lot, yeah, a lot of I feel like a lot of software gets built poorly because of the economic incentives of the business to, you know, make some sort of moat, right? So you have to design your software in some way to constrain your users freedom, to protect your revenue, you know. So I'm very optimistic about using AI to make it cheaper, to, instead of needing to make the perfect SaaS that, you know, has five nines of reliability and serves every use case and handles all these, you know, gotchas and edge cases and stuff like it. It's a single piece of software for a single person that does the thing that they needed it to do, and that is in kind of freeing them up and liberating them. So that's kind of an optimism I have for the future. That's the sort of thing I'd like to be building, um, and I uh, and so I guess I feel like the AI is enabling me in that sense to get at that end. I still feel the, you know, it's fun to code, and I'm starting to think of uh, it's a little bit, it's going to be a hobby now for me. And then it will also be sometimes I need to code to have better understandings of the systems that I'm building, because the AI is still limited and it's not going super critical, in, I think, ever. So it's not going to be able to solve all of my problems. So I need to stay somewhat sharp in understanding, but I'm optimistic that the TLOS of what I'm trying to get out of software development is being improved by, enabled more by this technology.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing that would be helpful in thinking about this is like just asking how are good products created? Is it the application of a mechanical technique, or is it the application of love and care and nurturing of the business or the thing? And I think it's like obviously the latter. The technique
Mm-hmm.
is irreplaceable, but it's not really the central part of it. And so like when we come to a particular task like creating good software, um, we have to be able to care about its creation. And I have a certain skill set that I've built up over 15 years that allows me to care about the details and the craftsmanship in a particular way using a particular technique, which is, console logging stuff.
Yeah.
And whereas, if I was able to upskill into using a multi-agent sort of like context engineering sort of flow, I would then have that skill set available to me through which to care for the craftsmanship of the thing. But then I guess you have to define what makes something good. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
just how it's built, but it's also the suitedness for the end user. And there's a there's a interplay between those two things. So like if you're making boots or something, if you just do one layer of stitching, you're not caring about the thing, you're doing a poor job, it doesn't look good, and it's just going to leak. Whereas if you stitch it multiple times, like it doesn't matter if you're using a sewing machine or doing it by hand, but when people move from stitching boots by hand to stitching boots with a sewing machine, they're usually optimizing for reduction of cost. And so at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, they end up producing a worse product. So the application of a tool makes it easy to stop caring. And if you're a craftsman, then the caring is irreducible. There might be like I don't think tools essentially prevent you from caring, but I think maybe that is part of that curmudgeonly impulse of like, I don't want the output to degrade.
Yes, and I think that's so important. I really think that it it's so enabling to the doomer curmudgeon to see all the slop in our society, um, t- newly invented AI slop, of course, but also, yeah, the cheaply produced good from China that only used um, one set of stitching, and it's going to fall apart in 5 months. And what I would love is that these end up in a technological landscape that enables the craftsman, the individual craftsman. So like, a lot of us have desires for, I'd love a bespoke hand built house. And I would love a customized dresser that's exactly my aesthetic and the right size that, is built, you know, with care and attention. And we, it's weird because some of those things were like more possible back before industrialization than they seem accessible now. I think similar with computers, it's like it's wild to me that we see progressing in some dimension of technology, and yet somehow that requires us to use computers more every time, rather than it. So my dream is that, yeah, like AI in some sense is what finally kind of liberates. It's like the information revolution of the information revolution, that it in some sense liberates us from intense focus on our computers all day every day. But I would love it if what we work on is tools and software and robots and technology to enable that individual creator to create something better with more care, more targeted at the end consumer, rather than this industrialization style, centralized, mechanized, one size fits all. Like I feel like Henry Ford really did us a disservice with this idea that, you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. There's kind of like there's a poverty or scarcity mindset to that. And it would be really cool that we come out on the other side of this, this new information revolution with kind of like another industrial revolution, that we are buying products from people that we know who make them with love, with us in mind, and that would be a functional economy.
Yeah, no, you shared that vision with me when you came on my podcast earlier this year, and I have been thinking about it a lot. I actually have a friend of mine who's a surveyor, and he was like, could you like build me a tool that would just like check a bunch of documents, would just read a bunch of documents and tell me if they look right. It would save me hours and hours. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. So I have like an actual person set up that I want to do that with. But yeah, and like, so curmudgeons look at tools and they see, here's something that's getting in the way, that's going to get in the way of me being able to do my work in a fulfilling and purposeful way. Imaginative people see a tool and they say, finally I can stop wasting time and I can accomplish the thing that I've always wanted to do. And so I just think it's interesting to note the difference between those. But have you read
Before you go, hold on to that. I do want to just self-acknowledge I'm that curmudgeon when it comes to my writing, right? I'm still so protective of my writing that it's not the product that I was going for if I prompted something to write it for me. So I want to use the hammer and chisel. I don't want to use the laser 5000 hammer and chisel, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's like the pastors prompting their sermon, that there are certain tasks that are essentially human and that have to, like, people come there to read your mind. And so if it's not your mind, then you've destroyed the entire purpose of the whole thing. I think art is similar. Like, there are certain kinds of art that can be prompted, but it's because it's utilitarian art. Like, its primary purpose is not the genius that can only exist within a person. It's something meant to sell or evoke an emotion or something like that. And so having these categories front and center now might allow us to actually like rediscover the very human aspects of every area of human activity and what it is that the human actually brings to the table. But have you read Tools for Conviviality by Ivan Illich?
I haven't read a book in.
Okay, you were citing McLuhan, so I thought maybe
that's for all thanks to your podcast.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I have that tetrad or whatever in my essay, but it's all thanks to you.
Yes. All right.
You're my
That's
book
so
reader
nice.
for me.
That's so nice to hear.
I've delegated. You're a form of technology to me.
Well, that's the purpose of my podcast. Is like I'm gonna like read all these weird things, and then I'm pretty sure a bunch of other people haven't thought about it. So I'm just gonna talk about it, and hopefully it'll spark some thoughts, and people will do something with it. But yeah, Illich talks about convivial tools, right? Which are a kind of tool that allows an individual to act in community with agency and with control. He appeals to some like socialist values. He talks about participatory and distributive justice. So participatory justice is like you get to do something meaningful within the system that you inhabit or the environment you inhabit. And then distributive justice is you get some output of your labor, which like I'm not sure those count as justice, etc. But the idea of the convivial tool is really powerful. You look at like farming implements. You start with the plow, and that's convivial. It's like, yeah, it's made out of metal, so you got to get the metal somewhere. But like, you got your horse, you got your plow, you're good to go. And then it turns into a tractor, and now you're relying
Wait, why
on.
is I don't understand why the plow is convivial. How is that community related?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the
Or it's
conviviality
the
is like.
justice of that you get your own profits or something.
Yeah, so you get to participate as a person using that tool in the way that you like. You can use the plow to plant potatoes or corn, whatever. And you're also not dependent on some external system in order to do your work. And so you're dependent to the extent that you have to get the metal for the plow, right? But you have the ability to own the output of your labor and to profit from it. Now, if you have a tractor, right, that's a pretty convivial tool too. You have the additional input of the whole petroleum industry, which is even bigger than mining, but your output is greater, right? So that might be worth it. But then as this grows into like John Deere's VIN locked, AI controlled, always online kind of tractors, now you're dependent on chemical fertilizers. You're dependent on a giant manufacturing industry, a particular manufacturer of the tractor. You're dependent on like financial engineering in order to finance the purchase of these $1 million tractors. And so, as a result, you can't just do whatever you want with the tractor. Like you can't take a season off. You have to be making the payments on the tractor. And so you become more of a disenfranchised part of the larger system. And like, I bring this up because I think that's what you're talking about with industrialized, large scale, software, where you have these huge systems like Facebook groups, fit every community into their little blue box. And there's no flexibility except what they can manage within software, which has limits, even if you're a giant company. And so the particularities of a community aren't always reflected in a Facebook group. And the engineering gets more and more difficult. There's diminishing returns to scale, where if you have to have 5 nines, then you got to have your whole like your workforce figured out and your infrastructure, server farms, CDNs, and all this technology that is not really useful if you just want to like host a website for your community, right? Like you could just put a BB code forum up and have basically the same thing that you have on Facebook. But Facebook has to deal with all the scale. And, this is just me saying your vision of convivial AI back to you, but with AI, you can create software that is bespoke and tailored to the particular problem of the user, and they don't have to learn HTML or Linux server administration in order to set it up. It makes a new kind of software possible, software that's not built to be a product, but software that is built to be like a handmade artifact tailored to someone's life. It's like the difference between buying a bowl at Pottery Barn and collecting your own clay and making the bowl. Like, which bowl is better? Definitely yours, even if it has a crack in it that's going to cause it to fall apart eventually, or if it's lopsided. Like, you've invested a lot of yourself into it. It's the color scheme that you wanted. It has emotional and relational meaning to it. Um, and we can't do that with every part of our lives, but with software, AI makes it possible to do that in more places and like to fix software that exists, right? Because like, why is that pop up there all the time? Like, can I just figure out a way to get rid of the cookie banner? Prompt an AI to build a browser extension to get rid of the cookie banner on that one site that you visit all the time. Like, so, and this is the problem with software, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it's always broken. Broken in
Mm-hmm.
small, infuriating
Because I
ways.
vibe coded it.
No, you can't. You can't blame the AI for this one. It's just always broken, no matter what. But
Mm-hmm.
AI makes it possible to fix that, not by making the developers more less error prone, but by making the user more empowered to actually fix their own problem.
Yeah, I really think that one size fits all idea has really, yeah, just I remember hearing this about cars. People buy cars not the color that they want the car, but a generic safe color to improve resale value. Um, and there's a lot of real estate architecture slop that it doesn't. It's not intended for any person specifically. It's specific. It's intended for a generic person to protect property
Oh, that
values.
makes me so mad. Like, because generic people don't exist. Like,
Right.
profiles are just averages of
There's no such
actual
thing as
people.
a yes. I've always had this despite loving technology, I'm actually kind of pretty bad at it because I feel like I am one of the quickest people to run into edge cases with various software and hardware. Because I just do things wrong, and I actually know that I can kind of put myself into like, okay, pretend I am the generic ideal user and use it really ploddingly and slowly and in a specific way to hopefully get through the flow. But my intuition is just to like break the intended process. I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's a, it's a fun life.
Well, I can say the same thing about myself. I was just saying the other day on Citadel Dispatch, like I can't use Telegram because I can't find any of the buttons because they don't have affordances. But
Mm,
like a lot of the really viral software is kind of like that. Like it doesn't follow the obvious boomer conventions for where a button should be or what a button should look like. I guess people learn software by just clicking around, but I'm always afraid to
mm.
click around, like, well, what if I do something destructive? And I guess I just don't trust the designer enough. But like trusting the designer means that you're giving up your agency and ability to anticipate what is the case. Um, and I want to be in control, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. But
Well, and I mean, yeah, this is maybe a tangent on software development, but there are these things about one of the ways people know how to use your product is by creating analogies to other products, right? But if your product isn't functionally the same as those other products, now you kind of have like these leaky analogies, and so it's not actually gonna fit perfectly. So that maybe that's always gonna be a problem. But yeah, I love the idea of yeah, eventually self modification of our own tools. I mean, not everybody's going to have that kind of agency, but also, I think I mentioned this on your podcast too. Also, like more permanent tools. Like, I think, I don't know if this guy would agree, but something that seems convivial to me about the plow or the tractor that I own is that it doesn't have to change every season. And so if I learn it once, I can actually not just learn it once, I can get better and better at it. I can get better and better at maintaining the tractor um, over time. And I mean, that's really fun. That's part of what, I miss about coding a little bit. I was getting better at coding.
Yeah, that's true.
And I
Languages and editors don't change that much, but like SaaS, the stuff that everyone's making changes all the time. It can get bought and disappear, or like, Trello was great for 10 years, and then it got sold to Atlassian, and then immediately got cluttered up with a bunch of product manager stuff. It was a complete misunderstanding of what the product was, and it was just gone. You can't have old Trello anymore.
yeah, until you vibe it yourself.
Yeah, which has
Um,
been done.
what what do you think about the limits of AI? Like, are you worried about superhuman AI?
No, mostly because I'm a Christian, and like that's just not the kind of thing that I think Christians should be worried about. God has a plan. God made the world in a certain way, and humans are at the center of it. And so I just don't believe it's possible for technology to take a primary place in creation. And and then yeah, like I work back from that position to be like, okay, well, what is the nature of technology? It's Technology is not alive. It's not a dynamic system. You can simulate a dynamism to a certain extent, but it's a function. You put data in, you get data out. Maybe you get more bits of data out, but it doesn't have any more information. Entropy is not only physical, but it's also informational. You can't get information if you didn't have it already. And so, and I think this is probably true of humans as well in natural terms. Like humans are a part of nature, but God has also imprinted his image on us. You were talking about being inhabited by the Spirit earlier, and that makes things like love possible. But, is novelty possible? Is it possible for humans to create new information? Well, like revelation is the injection of new information into creation that wasn't there before. But like God's attributes are always revealed in nature. And so, yeah, and nature has a telos too. Like it came from God, and it's going to a particular place, which is God. Like it's intended to be reconciled back to God. And so, like nature is this hermetically sealed, encapsulated system that is inherently temporary and inherently conditional and dependent the on the infinite spiritual world that contains it. In God we live and move and have our being. And so, in terms of like technology and AI, it can't ever transcend the physical reality that it's dependent on, and neither can we except through Christ. Like that's why Christ is saving us, because he brings us from natural to supernatural. But technology doesn't have that same promise. Technology is damned, essentially, unless God has some other crazy plans that we're not privy to.
Well, okay, we should dig into that. Well, the way I've been describing this is I call it Plato's cave's cave. So we are in Plato's cave, right? We see the shadow play on the wall of the cave. We don't see the makers of the shadows. Or, in the biblical terms, we see through a glass darkly. So, we have, in some sense, access to true reality, but it's marred by our sin nature, and our finiteness and then we wrote a bunch of blog posts about it, and we trained AI on our understanding of what we'd seen, and AI is trapped in that cave, and it could probably gain more understanding by being embodied, which is like a lot of the theorists talk about. But I don't think even then it will. Yeah, like you said, it's not going to have access to revelation in that sense, to
Yeah,
the spiritual reality.
yeah. The everything that it has access to is derivative, and the ability for AI to form its analog of a mental model of the world depends on that embodiment, like you're saying. But the embodiment depends on like the ability to create to replicate all the senses that we have, right? So it
Hmm.
has to be able to see, simple enough. It has to be able to hear. It has to be able to feel. and smell. And there are senses that humans have that we don't understand because, well, probably for a whole bunch of different reasons. They're physiological and more subtle. Those could be discovered and understood eventually. But I think there are spiritual and social senses that we have, like that are based on like values, like the ability to be loved or the willingness to love. Those aren't informational, and they're not exactly like senses of the world, but they're senses of a different dimension of the world, like the aesthetic dimension or the dimension of justice and truth. And those can't be replicated except through that, like they can't be embodied in the same way potentially. I'm not sure, but yeah,
there's a quote I really like on this. G.K. Chesterton says, "The madman is not someone who has lost his reason, but someone who has lost everything except his reason."
Yeah, exactly.
So
the AI is the madman.
The best case LLM is basically a madman.
Yeah, which is a scary thought, and definitely gives credence to all the doomer takes. But I read this book last year called Diaspora. It's a sci-fi book about these people who upload their brains into a computer, and then the computer has certain rules which protect their agency, and they go and explore the universe, and they live forever because they're just simulations, and they can upgrade their own simulated sensory apparatus into higher dimensions, but it's all simulated. And at one point they find this creature that's it's just like a mat of minerals, and it's convoluted, and the convolutions are actually a embodied simulation of 16-dimensional consciousness. So these things are alive, but their life is constituted only in the geometry of their bodies. And so the question was to what extent does consciousness exist if it's only predicated on the material embodiment of it? And how far can we get from reality and still remain real? And the link that always has to exist is embodiment. If we destroy our bodies, then we no longer exist. And so the quest for self self upgrading through simulation technology, whether it's uploading our brains into the machine or putting machine brains into our bodies, is an attempt to reconcile two things that are essentially at odds with each other. We are here, people are here, and machines are not. No matter how much you try to put the machines into bodies, their existence will never depend on them having a body because they're informational in character. But our existence does. It's really kind of strange.
So maybe this is a tangent. Would you, if a Neuralink existed, that what's your programming language of choice?
Should I admit it? Okay. I'll say Clojure. I like Clojure. I haven't used it in forever, but
okay, yeah. I started with Clojure.
Really?
It was one of my first programming languages.
Wow, amazing.
No good reason. It just seemed cool. I remember, actually, no, I do remember why. This guy was working on this editor for Clojure, and it would show you in a kind of a gutter the live values going through your program. And as a beginner, that was so helpful for me to get a mental model of what was actually going on.
Yeah, I remember using that. Clojure has all kinds of cool stuff like that because it's all so inspectable and open. It's very cool.
But I was going to ask if you would put attach a Neuralink to give you a perfect memory of the syntax of a programming language. So it'd be purely memory, right? And it's read only. You just access a static archive of information plugged into your brain.
I wouldn't personally do that, but in theory, I don't have any objection to it. I don't think that's.
Well, you want to excommunicate somebody from your church for doing that?
I don't think you would have grounds to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Don't read Dark Aeon. By the way, Diaspora as Greg Egan. I think that's one of the ones that I haven't read. He's got, I think, one of similar concept of like uploading your mind is a permutation city. Um, that he's like a long term life goal that I'd love to talk to him. He's what an incredible brain, but I'm just man, those books get so dense. It's
Yeah,
so
they're
it's
they're
so
work for sure. I definitely
it's so
skimmed over a lot of the Laplace transforms. Yeah,
he had a book that was all about like theories of everything, and it's like this conference where various people who are working on theories of everything, like the unification of gravity and whatever the other thing is. Um, and I was like almost like starting to hallucinate like while listening to it, like started to think that I was I don't know, it was really messed up.
all right.
You're
So
oh
I've got a question for you
mm,
on AI. So like I I love your vision for what AI could be, and I am also compelled by that. But what is there to prevent AI from, like, the main fear I have about AI is not apocalypticism or anything. It's just more bullshit jobs. You know, bullshit jobs are jobs where you have to babysit some piece of technology that is itself a component in a larger system that depends on the component for its existence, but which but the component has no actual like connection to the work being done. Like HR is kind of like that. It's like, well, we got to make sure that we don't get sued, and so we do our like counseling sessions with the employees. So like AI seems to me that the most reasonable way forward for AI is that AI will displace humans doing specific tasks because it'll be faster at them. And so it'll take a lot of that drudgery away, but then what's left is babysitting uh, LLMs. And even like context engineering is the replacement of one type of code for another, but the other type of code is tailored to the idiosyncrasies of the machine mind rather than the the idiosyncrasies of the deterministic machine mind. Um,
mm-hmm.
and like agents that Pablo Fernandez has got the whole 10x system where he's got all these different agents and they're all imprinted with different personalities. Like he's got a John Vervaeke agent, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
his
That's Gigi's fault.
yeah, his QA agent will go to John Vervaeke and be like, "What do you think about this?" And Vervaeke will be like, "Well, it seems like the havingness of the being is in contention with the whatever." I think that's super fun, but now you've
Mm-hmm.
got this Socratic dialogue going on between all these agents, but the humans are cut out of it because, well, I don't know, they might be included in
I
it.
think he also has an agent named Jesus.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
should
he
look that up.
does. Yep. Anyway,
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know exactly how to articulate this question, but I obviously haven't thought it through that clearly in concrete terms. But like, uh, how do you see that? How do you anticipate that? What makes you think that that's not going to happen, or is it going to happen in certain contexts? But you're not in that context. You're not in like a corporate context, and so it doesn't affect you.
Yeah. Well, my knee jerk hunch is that it will help us with bullshit jobs. The standard canned line for what you're saying is, a robot's not going to replace, AI is not going to replace your job. A guy using AI is going to replace your job, right? And so you should live in fear that someone's using AI better than you. Um, and because that person's going to replace you because they're going to be so much more efficient than you. And what is that guy doing? Yeah, he's babysitting a lot of AIs, and that's like what I'm vibe coding. I've got like several different screens working on multiple projects in parallel, and I'm like, I am literally a manager now, right? That's you're talking about what the tetrad or whatever. What does it bring back? It's like being a manager. It's like it's turned me, an individual contributor, into a manager, which it's been very jarring for me. That's one reason I guess I don't have so much sympathy for people like worried that their work is changing because like my I've been a programmer for like 4 or 5 years and my workflow has been radically revolutionized like basically every single year. Um, so I don't my hunch is that because of the what I call the betterness problem, it's impossible to for an AI to define something that's better than its training set, you know? So the limit would be it would detect what the best thing in its training set is and make things like that. But it won't. We know it won't. Um, and and it definitely can't define or create something better than what's in its training set. And so for every individual who is at the uh, leading edge of their field doing the best work, I think not only are they um, not going to be disrupted, I think they become more valuable. I mean, we're finally starting to see like programmer salaries, like with this, you know, this because of this AI race, which is obviously a little hype fueled, but like the you know these programmer salaries are like beating like professional athlete salaries. It makes sense that it becomes more and more valuable that there are people at the actual leading edge, and because that's if if everybody else is vibe coding, it's all trickle down from this like really a good code. I mean, I was trying to vibe code some Zig, which is a new programming language, maybe a year ago, or not even a year, like 6 months ago, and it just didn't work at all. And the new Claude models have clearly been trained on Zig now and are just killing it, doing, you know, great. Not nearly as good as a real Zig dev, but one of the reasons why I feel like it's so good right now is because they've only been trained on code by Zig people. And who are Zig people? They're like crazy, nerdy, obsessed, you know, the sort of person that would seek out an alternative to C and learn it and, you know, be part of its community and while it's in alpha state. So the code from these people is, you know, that training set is kind of awesome right now. And my code that I'm vibe coding is not nearly as good as theirs. And so anyways, all that to say, there's absolutely a role for being great at what you do. And I think being, I don't know what the number is, maybe top 10%, maybe top 50% of your field, you can just be an individual contributor and do, you know, exactly, you know, handcraft great code. I think there's still going to be a lot of value in that. With the babysitting AI stuff, what I hope is that we're reducing and compressing the bullshit jobs. Like, so you mentioned you're doing a documents thing for a surveyor. I'm working on a documents thing for the construction world. There is all this make work. A lot of it's kind of the fault of bureaucracy and regulation and, you know, old systems that evolved from like paper-based systems and things like that. And we put them onto the computers and we take people that they don't, their ideal day is not in front of a computer. You know, that's not why they got into surveying, I'm guessing. But they're just chained to a desk, you know, shuffling through PDFs. So yes, they will have to babysit the AI while it processes through their work. But ideally, if we build good products, now there's babysitting AI for 5 hours a week instead of 30 hours a week. Or instead of doing it manually 30 hours a week. Because what the alternative is with the current state of the information revolution is that we've created all this really complex software that doesn't talk to each other very well. And all these bespoke different processes. And we use the human being sitting at the desk as like the data bus between them. And we're just like, you know, overclocking our brains to try to sift through all of this information that's been generated. And so I hope that you basically end up with bullshit jobs, like maybe like a 5 to 1 decrease. There's a guy that still has a bullshit job and is babysitting AI, but he's doing the work of what 5 people did before. Or those 5 people will be able to do more of what they like doing, and a smaller portion of their day spent babysitting the AI. I have to admit that it seems like, and this is, I think, part of, again, coming back way to the start, my frustration with the curmudgeon blow up the data centers only take is that it's not going to guard us against the likely bad outcome, which is that we all just end up doing more with computers all the time. And like most of our work is sifting out the AI generated slop that got into our AI pipeline, so that we can generate slop for somebody else that this is going to have to sift out. I could totally see that happening. So I really want us to be really thoughtful about what these things are good at and what they're bad at, and try to steer the ship and be part of the steering. And like that, the people that I like are the Mark Zuckerberg of this next generation, rather than Sam Altman.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like the two different perspectives on this issue is like our conclusion is exactly the same, but I identify as a curmudgeon and you identify as a futurist, and like I hate what's his name, Ray Kurzweil. I just hate futurists, and futurists hate Luddites. But it's like if you thought about this stuff at all, like you recognize that you cannot go back. There is no going back. And so you have to do like all the really difficult, annoying work, or interesting, depending on your perspective, I guess. That's probably the main difference, is that futurists are like, yes, all right, let's figure out all these new things. And then the conservatives are like, yeah, I'd rather just like not.
Yeah.
But the conclusion is like, yeah, don't blow up the data centers. They're just going to rebuild them. You're only going to waste a bunch of money. I read about the guy who made the Killdozer. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, such an amazing story. The city was giving him a hard time about his sewer line, and he just refused to fix it himself. And so instead, he built a giant bulldozer with concrete and steel armor, and went around and bulldozed like 11 buildings in the city that he lived in. Just an insane story, but like that is
A
not the way
national
to handle
hero.
it.
I'm surprised we don't have a day celebrating Killdozer.
I want a Killdozer day. I'm into it. We'll
Um,
celebrate the Unabomber on the same day.
yeah, it's like a better purge. Like there's these sculptures near me in Austin that they, with all the imagination in the world, and I have a lot, you can't think of anything but poop. They just look like literal large, like larger than life figures of poop. I would love, on a Killdozer day, that should be absolutely legal to destroy. Um, yeah, what were you talking about just before that? Before Killdozer?
I do have the next point. Maybe it'll come to you.
The blowing up the data centers isn't going to help. I mean, the point I always like to talk about is Socrates was against writing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his reasons for being against writing are very correct. It gives you the sense of knowledge without knowing, the feeling of wisdom without wisdom. And he's super right about it. Also, God wrote the Bible is a book.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so I'm trying to coin a new term. It's like you have a bite of the wisdom sandwich, but you don't have the whole sandwich. And so I see the curmudgeon pointing out the terrifying problems with AI is an important part of the wisdom sandwich. But if you don't have the whole sandwich, yeah, you don't know how to act, like actually what to do in the world with this situation that we're in. Because I agree with you that we don't go back, and people hate hearing that. But I mean, show me, show me if you're so wise, you're so wise in pointing out these problems. Show me the wisdom in pretending that we can go back.
Yeah. Yeah, and like another thing, the simulation of wisdom is, I wonder how much AI assisted coding creates a simulation of building something. Because like yes, you can build things that solve your particular problem at a small scale. That's great, but when regular people try to create a product out of vibe coded materials, a product is not just code. A product is like a brand, a marketing strategy, a uh, like its design, its maintenance, it's security, it's all these different things other than the actual functionality that you're trying to achieve. And
Mhm.
I'm not like really worried about this because I just don't think that people who get into building a product without understanding that it takes a lot of investment and commitment to actually build the thing are going to stick with it. And so those products are just going to disappear. I think there is an illusion that you're able to do more than you actually are with AI because you're discounting all of the difficult human tasks that are associated with a product. I've been intending to do usability testing for my product for like 3 months now, and I've done it once because I just don't want to do it. I would rather code. And so the same sort of like laziness is, if you're doing AI coding to avoid doing any hard work, you're not going to avoid the hard work. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think that's so true. And, I mean, one, again, just looking at the current state of affairs, like I know as a vibe coder that there's basically a certain project size or kind of a project novelty budget, right? If the architecture or the problem space or whatever the language choice is weird enough that the AI just starts choking on it. And so you hit this point where vibing is just you're not actually getting improvement anymore, right? And so okay, well, I was trying to make a useful product and it's 90% done. I just need to do the next 90% and now the AI can't handle that. And so I'm literally, looking at one of my projects thinking like I might just have it open up in one window and I might write it myself in another window, Um, maybe with some AI autocomplete would be nice. Um, but oh, there's another but to that.
Yeah, I've had the same problem. I build it for a while and then I just throw it away and then do it myself. Maybe what you could do is like wait till the next Claude model comes out and then finish the project. And then you'll
Yeah,
get
yeah,
99% of the way there.
yeah, exactly. Well, and then the other thing is, I do think it's actually a really interesting tell. Again, kind of that gel man idea of like, what do people feel comfortable vibing? I always thought it was really interesting to me. And think of information theory. Like one way to think of information is surprisingness. So like if I'm saying I'm sending you a message in binary and I say 0000000, duh. If it's all zeros a million times, I could actually just send you the number zero and also the number a million and just like basically encode it. It would compress really well because there's no surprisingness in it, right? Whereas if I'm trying to send you a particular still frame from like the Lord of the Rings, um, there's like a specificity to that information, and it's surprising. It would be hard to write like a really simplifying algorithm that would generate it. Um, and with I think something that people have all kind of before AI, you'd have before LLMs, you'd have autocomplete in Gmail, and you kind of see it start to extend your sentence with a few words. And if you hit tab or whatever, it just autocompletes, and then you keep going. And I kind of think it's kind of funny as a writer because it almost always writes the thing that I don't want to write because it's unsurprising,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like if I'm trying to write good, it's almost helpful to see the the way I could write this with zero information content. It's like, okay, so this would, similar, I guess, if you're making software and you want to have a moat, like if you try to vibe code it, what part is easy and what part does it fall over? The the valuable part of the product is probably the part that's it's falling over on. So I think there's something interesting. I think the best fit for AI right now in development is this like parallel exploration. Let's let's get some rough prototypes going really quickly. Then yeah, my ideal version of software that I'd ship probably is going to involve me much more in the loop, designing it and honing it. If I still remember how to code after been vibing for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's a really interesting heuristic to figure out where to apply AI to and which and what order of operations to do things in. Like it's better at UI than I am, like by a good amount. Uh,
Hmm.
it's awful
It's
at
better than
logic.
UI that I am, and I'm a
Yeah.
front end dev.
But it's awful at logic, and especially like concurrent or asynchronous logic. It's just like, well, we like sent a promise off. I guess we'll just guess what happens next, or like timeout
Mm,
or something. It's so crazy. But with that in mind, you could build an entire back end for your application where the UI is not like React components. It's functions that have a really well defined conventional interface that then hide the complexity of your entire application. And then you're just like, here's a bunch of UI functions. Like, I think about this in terms of hooks, like React hooks are often very coupled to the component that they're used in. But they don't essentially have to be. And your asynchronous logic could be using observables or something like that. And so you like do everything in your sophisticated, disciplined, mature way, but then you cover it with like this interface that junior coders would write. And then you tell the AI, like, all you know is this interface, build the UI. And then it could like build the entire UI in 10 minutes and for $3. And that would save you 6 months of development or something like that because you already took care of all the like the the 20% that's hard. It's like you
mm.
wrote 3,000 lines and you get a 30,000 line application out of it. That's actually all good. It's compelling. I might have to give that a try.
Yeah, really wish the current AI had or current tools had better ways of sort of like marking files of like this is the beautiful core of this application. Or even if I vibed it, like we got this good. We ran so many tests. This is now the immutable structure that we're building a bunch of incidental complexity around, right? But this is the essential complexity, and this is what we got right. And so, if you're going around, um, you know, you know, trying to fulfill my prompt to the best of your little AI's ability, uh, don't mess with this. This is the key. This is good. Um, and so yeah, we don't have quite the terminology or the tools right to define that. The other way, yeah, is that yeah, you include basically yeah that your engine as some sort of library that you're going to then have the AI talk to. I think that's actually it's pretty interesting. I think there are other ways of using it. Yeah, like that kind of riffing on ideas, making quick tweaks. Oh, there was another one that I was just thinking of, but well, I can't remember. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Oh, you're talking about the order of operations. Um, there's just a random YouTube essay because I get a lot of YouTube recommends of people thinking about AI now because I can't read, so to do my research for the book I want to write, I watch YouTube, and this guy was talking about compression and expansion. And I thought it's really interesting. I don't think it's even value laden, like one's good and one's bad, but it's actually a really interesting way of thinking about AI, of what it's doing and whether it will apply well to a certain use case. Are you taking a whole bunch of like you taking the Lord of the Rings and asking for a summary, right? So you're going to get a really lossy, high level kind of piece of trash. Um, or are you taking like one short little prompt, like make me a recipe tracking app, and you get expansion. It turns into thousands of lines of Next.js code or something like that. Um, so it's an interesting way of examining. So like something I've enjoyed summary with is working on my own AI essay, I send it into Notebook LM. It makes a podcast of it, and I listen to it to understand it. But I wouldn't trust it to publish that summary, right, as my work. And I also wouldn't trust, an expansion of a summary of like an outline. I wouldn't trust its expansion as something. But there's I don't know, there's something there to play with, because there are a lot of times, especially for coding, where you basically you want compression. You want to take a whole bunch of context, a ton of information about the problem, and it's synthesizing like this library you've never used that has all these different methods on it, all this documentation, and it's taking all of that and it's finding exactly what it needs, and pooping out like one little file that does the thing that you need.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Yeah, the compression definitely. And I that's something that I feel like AI has been very bad at. Um, in terms of coding, it usually produces an order of magnitude more lines of code than I do.
Mm.
Like that test project I did, it did 10,000 lines of code in 3 hours, and I was helpless. I could not fix it because there was too much code. My implementation was 1,500 lines, and it was more feature complete.
Wow.
But what was I gonna say? Like the flip side of all this, like encapsulation and abstraction and letting the AI do its job, is like a lot of the time I think through doing UI. I like put the button here, and then I put it over here, and then I put it over here, and then I put it over here, and it makes me reflect about it more, as well as the problem that I'm actually solving. So the ability to create a functional core that can be used to power whatever AI or whatever UI the AI comes up with is actually a fallacy. That's a return to waterfall development, where you're specifying things a priori without actually understanding the problem first. I think I could be better at that. Like I worked with an engineer a number of years ago, and he was an awful coder, but he taught me the discipline of like, maybe write a spec before you write your program. Just like write a page. Just think about it before you get started, and it'll save you a lot of time. So I think there's some wisdom to that, and maybe AI could push us in that direction to a certain extent. But
Right. I think one cool thing is it does require you to describe the outcome you want. And it's possible to sit down to code and start coding. And it's like, why? Wait, what? I'm adding like an abstraction for this. And it's like, this isn't, the program's not going to even do this. Like, why am I, it's like you just sort of start coding. I really want, that's one of the things I want us I don't know if this is a McLuhan thing, but like to learn from, or part of the mirror aspect is that like self-prompting. Like I think we live way under reflected lives. Not that we should sit around and navel gaze, but that we should be trying to live with purpose as much as we can manage to. So we should be self-prompting, or we shouldn't like be autopiloting, which is a lot of our culture is kind of designed around giving us like a cozy path to autopilot down, and that's just not, you're not going to get your the best results. I also thought there's interesting something you just said kind of reminded me what you're talking about, embodiment, right? This is kind of like the flip side of the fact that we're embodied, is that's our thinking is very embodied. And so that's definitely something that, yeah, that if you're not in the trenches writing the code, you might not be thinking fully enough about the product. Or, I mean, there's also times when I'm down in the trenches writing the code, my consciousness is so dominated by, and maybe this is a skill issue, just getting to work, that I'm stopped thinking about the reasons of why I'm doing it.
Yeah. The self-prompting thing is interesting. I think about this a lot because I don't self-prompt exactly. One of my friends has an LLM that's primed. It's prompted to be Jocko Willink. And so he's like, hey, Jocko, can I like work on this project today? And Jocko's like, all right, so Like, make sure that you time box everything properly, okay, buddy? It's hilarious, but I don't really do that, but I do use AI to do research and like write snippets of code that I don't understand or tell me about APIs or how to navigate UIs or whatever. Like instead of reading Google's documentation or something like that, AI is great for that kind of thing. But whenever I ask AI a question, I am always acutely aware that I'm losing the opportunity to ask a real person that question. And it's not it's not that there's an actual opportunity cost there, because if I didn't have AI, I just wouldn't ask the question. It's not like it's displacing the relationship that I would have otherwise with people, but what it does is it points out to me how dysfunctional my relationship with other people is, to the point where I'm not willing to ask, you know. And I think this is like partly just a me thing, but maybe is cultural too. But how nice would it be? Like, I'm sure my pastor is open to answer this question I have about theology, but I'm going to ask the LLM about the eternal submission of the Son to the Father instead. And I don't ask my pastor because I don't want to bother him. I know he's busy all the time, but maybe he'd be really happy to answer that question, and there's no opportunity to find out now. And a lot of the time I want to do that self-prompting stuff. Like, I want to talk to someone and figure out, well, what should I be working on? I have all these different projects and I'm not sure how to prioritize and stuff. And the LLM, its response is frequently so sycophantic. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking it all along the right lines. These are good questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What's your advice? And just having like a mentor figure or just a peer who you can be like, could you just like meet once a week and we'll talk for an hour about my problems, or your problems or whatever. And it's kind of interesting seeing how far AI falls short on that, in that capacity. It's pushing me to actually like, maybe I should pick a friend and ask him if he wants to
Mm.
meet weekly and help me with my all the tasks I have at work.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Yeah, again, that's kind of like the mirror role. Like the whatchamacallit, the oh, I totally lost my train of thought. The idea that you're oh, like, why do we make these things in the first place? Like, why do we make AI? I think there is kind of an innate drive that we have to draw pictures of each other and write novels about each other and to just sort of try to describe humans. And so, like, this is this kind of wild artifact that kind of describes the sort of the un it's not very rational, just sort of the language center of our brain, and kind of how stimulating that is to be able to have these conversations, and how interesting it is to watch something be able to be so much so intelligent, like, by just word association. So it's important for me to remember that, like, am I is that a great idea, or did it just sound good when I said those words in a series? But yeah, I love that idea of it reminding us more. I've been trying to think of, I'm messing around with some Nostr, like, encrypted messaging stuff, and I thought it'd be cool, like, when I'm vibe coding, to add like an MCP tool called like Phone a Friend. So it would, like, I mean, this would be awful. I was thinking probably it would just mostly be designed to DM me, like if it's like, I'm out off for a walk and my vibe code is cooking, like DM me a question or something like that. But kind of how fun would it be, to make some programming things more social, where you could pull some kind of easily, seamlessly pull somebody into a problem that you're, discussing with the AI. Or, I mean, sure, it wouldn't be that hard to just maybe copy and paste something into a prompt. But we realize that, right? Like, that's one of the hard parts about if you're reaching out to somebody for code. It's like, okay, are they going to have to clone your whole project and like set up the whole environment to run it and everything like that? Like, there's a lot of friction to that. I learned a lot of code early on by pair programming using VS Code stuff. VS Code has like pretty good like shared editor support. So like, yeah, maybe this helps us realize how wonderful it is and like the best way to collaborate with people. Um,
Yeah, I like that idea a lot,
and then
even
we
if it
could
was
just
just like a phone call.
say
I
what?
like that idea, even if it was just like a phone call where it's like you're at your editor and it brings someone in. Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, people could like another technology that we should restore is like the AOL Instant Messenger like status, right? So it's like I don't know if I was ever bored for once in my life, I could just put my status like open to drop in, you know, coding conversations with people. You know, I'll be your rubber duck. You don't have to talk to ChatGPT for the next 5 minutes. You know.
yeah. One thing that could be kind of difficult about that is incentivizing or making space for that kind of thing, because like a lot of the time that is the most productive kind of work, but making yourself available for it is like, well, I've got all these other things to do. I can't really do that. And so redefining work to not be as narrowly output focused and more oriented at ideation and kind of skipping a whole bunch of steps because we now have that ability in a lot of ways. I don't know. Maybe that's an illusion, and there's always a certain amount of drudgery to be done. But
There is always a certain amount of drudgery, but I'm really I I'm feeling this right now. There's so much opportunity. There's so many things to build. I'm so enabled right now to build them. And I feel like I almost, I did a little bit of coding. Try not to work on Sunday, so I like this was fun for me to just work on building a ray tracer in Zig. Um, but like I feel like I don't have time to slow down. I almost don't have time to like handwrite things, you know. Um, and so yeah, I don't feel like I have a lot of time to sit back and do a lot of reflecting. And I don't think that's right to feel that time scarcity. Like I should have more patience, but I do really do have that sensation. I even tell people it's like don't worry about getting left behind by AI. Because everything changes completely. All the processes change completely every 6 months. So we're all relearning them. Um, but yeah, I do really struggle with that feeling of this urgency that I've got so much to get done that I am not maybe taking as much time to reflect or to reach out to people to talk through things.
yeah, one thing. So I just finished this book. I spent 4 weeks, probably like more than half of my time over those 4 weeks writing this book just so I could get it done and off of my mind and get back to like being fully focused on coding. And what that forced me to do was kind of put off a bunch of bug fixes and stuff that otherwise would feel really urgent. But if I treated it as urgent, I wouldn't be able to have the space to think about this book and get it done. And what happened in 4 weeks of neglecting bug fixes was nothing. Uh, like nothing bad happened. And I'm coming back to full focus on development with the mentality of like I don't have to be in a hurry. I don't have to be like anxious and stressed out about getting stuff like put together and responding to people super fast. And it's really nice. I don't know what that has to do with AI, but it's just something that I have noticed yesterday and today as I get back to fixing bugs. It's like this bug doesn't have to be done today. I don't have to have a fix for it. I can work at my pace. It's okay.
Well, I think one thing that could have to do with the AI is I think AI is going to start setting expectations of like this fix could be a prompt. So why haven't you fixed
Yeah,
it? Why
yeah,
haven't you fixed it yet? Which I hope one way to do that is that you wire up GitHub Actions to Claude, and simple issues you just ask Claude to fix, and you review the PR, and if they're good, so that might be one of the ways. But I do think we're probably going to struggle. Like if you see this wow demo on Twitter where somebody makes like a 4-dimensional cube simulator with a bouncing ball in it in 30 seconds, and you're like I'm trying to get the font to load and it's not loading. It's like that expectation I think is going to be hard for us to what one of the stories I put, or one of the things I put in my essay book is the story of John Henry, who it's like a old American folk tale. This guy is a steel driving man, and he says he'll die with the hammer in his hand, and he's driving railroad ties, and along comes a machine that does it better, or well, it does it, and it replaces everybody, but he races the machine and he wins, and then he dies. So that's the life of an excellent individual
Yeah,
contributor.
yeah. Now I felt that pressure. Grok is like doing all of its astronomical math in answer to a prompt to get an answer. And the demos are always better than the reality. But there are people like you and Alex Gleason and Pablo who are really producing impressive stuff by purely vibe coding it. So like it's evidently possible, but my experience with it has been like, and I haven't just phoned it in. I've probably spent 80 hours plus working to learn how to use AI. And my experience is just like it makes me less productive. And I don't know exactly what to attribute that to, but kind of going back to that like self-prompting thing. This is another thing that I'm nervous about with AI is, so like the idea of the profile is an average of a bunch of people. The person that a profile represents doesn't actually exist. I'm talking like a marketing profile or like an ideal customer profile, like Mary is a accountant. She's 43 and she has a bunch of, like, she doesn't actually exist. She's just a stand-in for the 20,000 people that you are targeting. And so with advertising profiles, you're shown ads that they think will appeal to you, but are proxied by that profile, that quantified profile of who they think you are similar to, right? And that is reductive, and it reduces, it takes the quality out of the person and reduces it to a bunch of quantities. AI does the same thing, but potentially in a different way. Like AI is the average, right? They're the profile. And then when you interact with a profile, you're interacting with this ideal average person, which is not a natural human experience. And so what is the effect that has on you? Does that make you more like the average person? I don't really think so. I think it's more like it makes you the kind of person who's conditioned to respond to people as if they were average, right? And so you start interacting with your agents in such a way. Pablo always talks about like he verbally abuses his agents to get them to do what he wants them to. And so like, and I'm not saying that he's going to start verbally abusing all of his coworkers, but the patterns that you apply in order to coerce the agent to do the thing that you want them to do are going to transfer to a certain extent to your relationships with other people. Or maybe like conversely, it's like you get all your objectification jitters out, and then when you talk to a real person, you value them so much that you get to have an organic, real conversation.
Or maybe the medium one is like I can see myself getting mad, right? And I get mad for similar triggers of frustration, and maybe I hide that better or don't lash out at a normal human, but I do lash out at the AI or something like that. But it helps me notice, what triggers me, in some sense.
Yeah, and you can use that as an opportunity to practice sanctification, or you can use that as an opportunity to like fall deeper into bad habits of sin. But you get this this dummy to work with. Yeah, I can't tell if it's salutary or not.
I mean, I think one thing I think I think maybe this is one of the reasons why it clicks so much for me is that I have like a very poor retention of what I view to be the mundane. And therefore, when I'm sitting down to do something, I can't remember all of the normal things to do. I can think of some novel thing that I just imagined right that second, because that's exciting to me. But I can't think of how would a traditional human being do this, right? So it is helpful to like see, even if it's just an illustration of what would be too boring to even consider doing, seeing what that would be, listed out is a nice response from an AI. But yeah, I don't know how much it's impacted the way that I I interact with people other than what we were talking about before. Is like I do see there are times when I'm asked it a question that in the past I probably would have reached out to a human for help.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any other thoughts.
Well, that was a lot of thoughts. I think we've covered a lot, and I really appreciate your time. What's the book that you just published?
It's called Building Nostr. You can find it at
Okay.
building-nostr.coracle.social. I posted it on Nostr as well. It's just it's kind of a like philosophically oriented approach at building Nostr applications, and philosophically in a practical way. Like it's not a bunch of code samples and stuff, but it's also not just it's mostly not me pontificating about human nature. There's a little bit of that in that there too, but
Okay, that's good.
it's like, how
Are
do
you
you
are
select relays and stuff like that?
are you gonna write a book about the ethics of technology? I feel like you've hinted at this.
Yeah, I was working on it and I got 10,000 words in and I gave up. Uh, I was writing that because it's the book that I want to read, really, is like,
Mhm.
what are the answers to how to engage with technology as a Christian? Um, is technology essentially a Tower of Babel, or are we building a garden city? I think it's the latter, but it's very hard for me to articulate a watertight, like apologetic for things like the internet. Like I like the internet. I use it a lot. It has some good things, but all the goods that the internet produces are qualified, and all the negative externalities are very real. And so technology can never really be frozen and analyzed in isolation. It's part of this, like, this ecosystem idea is really essential to understanding technology, but also society and law and everything else. So it's just like way bigger than I am, and I couldn't do
And
it.
I think that's one of the things that's so frustrating to a lot of people about this is they would love a static answer, and it keeps changing. It's like, oh, I finally integrated social media into my life in a healthy way for myself and my family. Oh wait, now I'm supposed to understand AI? Like this is frustrating. And I can understand that frustration while at the same time I'm trying to encourage people. It's like, well, like people have always, like you're a farmer and you are growing crops and you get really good at it, and then there's like a drought one year. It's like the environment isn't static, and we have to somehow find a way to continue to apply wisdom to the situation we're in rather than wishing for last year's
Yeah,
situation
and life isn't
that we
static
were.
either. Like static
Yeah.
is actually death. Like life
Mm,
has there's like a power differential in order for has to exist in order for work to be done. So life is always dynamic and
like a
unbalanced.
shark. you, you gotta swim forward or you die.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. But yeah, like uh, I think of Buddhism. Buddhism is oriented at nirvana. Nirvana is
Mm.
Sanskrit for annihilation. Buddhism is a religion of death. Peace and inertia are the opposite of living. Living requires chaos. I prefer my favorite philosopher is Pablo, who says embrace the chaos. So that's what we have to do. We have to embrace the chaos, and we are not going to have
Well,
answers
if you
by
look at
definition.
one of my vibe coded code bases, I think you're gonna see a lot of life there.
It's a living
Let's just say
organism.
that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for I'm not going to encourage you to keep writing that book because I don't know yet whether it's truly possible to finish a book about this kind of stuff. But I'll let you know how it goes. And but yeah, please DM me all your chapters. And yeah, uh, people should follow you on Noster. Is that
That's where I
do
am.
you have your NPub memorized?
Yeah, it starts with npub one. You should
Okay,
be able to
that's
guess
pretty
the
good.
rest of it from there. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. This was a fun discussion. I always enjoy talking to you. and about all these
Yeah.
things. I feel like with 2.5 hours, I was finally able to say most of what I think about AI, which I have not felt like I've done the topic justice so far. So
I'm so glad. Yes, I know. I watch you, get bullied by Pablo on Nostr, and then you write an essay about your feelings, and I'm like, I disagree with everything in here, but I think he's a good person. So I'm glad we could finally really, really talk this through. I really appreciate it.
yeah, it was good.